We were doing full-time Christian ministry with an organization called Young Life in Texas. We had been in Baltimore. I'd been in nursing in Baltimore. But we decided we were going to follow the Lord wherever. We went to manage a Young Life property in South Texas, but were washed out by the hurricane. Syria. The hurricane hit, and they said, come down and take a look at it. So we came down, and the last minute, a house opened up. The doors opened up for my husband to get a job at the local state hospital, and we moved to the Eastern Shore, lock, stock, and barrel. But of course, we're involved in a Bible study and prayer group, and then became involved with the community, raising kids and, the usual things you do. Got to know the high school kids, got involved with the band parents, and, we were doing Young Life, working through the community. And so, we got a reputation of doing that. And then we started band parents, and we raised funds for band uniforms. And somebody said to me one day, Addie, you really need to do something. You need to just run for office. And I'm not, no way. I'm going to school to get my degree. I'm working. I don't have time for this. But if you need somebody to put a name on the ballot just to save the party, I will do it. And we created a presence, and we carried, and then we realized there hadn't been a Republican active party for like 20 years. And I ran for the House of Delegates because I had gotten exposed to that in my nursing role doing legislation. And I knew, Clayton Mitchell and a lot of the individuals who worked on the shore. Of course, there I am standing up telling them that they're not doing enough, that I'm going to do a better job. It was a little intimidating, but I lost. But I thought, I'm never going to do this again, because I had knocked on some 8,000 doors, really spent a whole year working hard in addition to my full-time job. And the interesting thing was, when it came time for the election in '94, we had a dynamite group at the state level who did a lot of good polling. They did a lot of data collection. They knew what we had to do and where we needed to go. And we had a team of people who focused on that, didn't get caught up in the drama that happens from time to time with personalities. And we won. And '94, the shore went primarily Republican, and the 37th Legislative District went Republican. So we knew that what we were doing was very effective. We all got there, and it's like, oh my gosh, what do we do now? Yeah. Because we had never thought about winning. We had thought about running, and now we were all winning, and the county council was big and bold. And, when you're young and bright and you want to take on the world, you don't have any idea what the Goliath you're going to be up against. You're just ready to go after them. From my understanding of organizational behavior and how things work, you do not tackle people face on. I knew that from working with difficult clients. You don't go head to head. You back up and you win from the side, you win the right to be heard, you figure out how to do it before you move. So I would go in where others wouldn't tread, because, you're just going to pick up the pieces and figure out what you can do, but you stand up to everybody, and that's all right. I thought I'll only last, one term, and then it was the whole thing about casinos, and I was just, we are not going to have a casino at the Hyatt. No way. We're not going to have one in Cambridge. Stood up, and my supporters threatened to leave me. And I thought, well, Lord, if this is what I got to do, I got to do it, and that's the end of it. Well, that fizzled, and life went on. We were able to continue to build a good economy in Dorchester, and Salewinds started then, and I was in the middle of all of that. The Harriet Tubman, I was fortunate and blessed to be involved in that even before I went into the legislative arena, and so much has happened as a result of that. Once I got through that first term and a second term, and I was on Economic Matters, so it was right up my alley to be dealing with health care and health insurance and things that impacted the citizens. But when we began to have more nurses and doctors in the legislature, because I had been in state government, they decided I needed to be on the budget committee because I was bringing a lot of personnel and pension issues, and we didn't have a lot of people who really understood state government. And I was able to take a leave of absence, and to declare my potential conflicts, even though I wasn't, in a position to make decisions. I was frontline worker, so we were able to manage those conflicts well, when it came to time to vote on the budget. But at least I would understand Title X, what the law said with regard to mental health, and I knew a lot about the other aspects as well. So that's been a comfortable place to be. It'd be much more interesting to be over in the policy committee, but really budget does set the policy.
Well, they said you can tell a lot about an organization by the budget they have, and it's where the real stuff happens.
Right, well, the budget is done by the budget secretary and by the secretary. So as a state employee, in the ranks, even though I was clinically responsible for a unit and I would be presented a budget, we all knew that it was just a paper exercise. I mean, it was so funny. I said, if they'd let me hire and fire and, and because I had to be responsible for the people that came to me, it'd be nice to have input in who I got, but that's not the way state government works. But that's all right, but that had given me a lot of experience in understanding, the various issues and how to think about the budget implications and how to think about staffing and overtime and, personnel and health benefits and retirement and, the pecking order. So that's been a good experience to be able to participate in that. And then the whole delivery system, which is, working a delivery system, whether it's in psych, mental health, behavioral health, across public and private, and knowing what the other organizational structures look like for the state. So I knew that there were certain conditions that were going to warrant more complicated interventions and systems help, like brain trauma, like the mixing. And years ago, mental health was here and addiction was here, and they couldn't talk to each other. It's brain disease from Addie's perspective. Brain disease is brain disease. Nobody talks about brain disease. We've gotten to the place where we call it behavior. Well, behavior implies you can get your stuff together, and that's not true if you have a severe and persistent mental illness and or severe addiction, because it controls you. You can't control it. One of my initiatives was, we need to bring this together. We need to bring this together. And I thought, well, this is going to be easy. I'll just put a bill in and they'll bring it together. Well, that's been a really big journey because we had separate structures. But we began to put a work group together. So you put a bill together, you get a work group, and then you get the work out, you get on the work group. And then you have advisory committees that are kind of very influential. Then you've got to bring them together, and they don't want to come together. So we had to do a lot of work over a couple of years to make that happen. So I wind up being on the Behavioral Health Advisory Committee that was piece of my legislation, the Suicide Commission, and we just passed a bill this session that would create a suicide review board so that every completed suicide or would be looked at to look at what information there is from a variety of departments to be able to figure out what we can glean from that to prevent further suicides. And we have a lot of initiatives that we really need to be working on because of the uniqueness of our counties. You have counties that are some of the poorest in the state, like Dorchester, where poverty, interruption of poverty has been a goal, and we want to do more about that and are working on that. So a number of the initiatives I've worked with, one is the Lieutenant Governor's 2-Gen Commission. You know, it's where we take the silos of government, and instead of continuing those, we wrap services around the family, not just the identified person in the family, but you look at the whole family. Because in many situations where you have kids in trouble with the law or whatever, you have fragmented families, you have lack of housing, you have lack of job training, you have lack of resources. So how we work that together, and we've got a couple of initiatives over in Dorchester County. So being aware of that. In this county, you have, again, how do we balance environment and growth? How do we maintain diversity in our energy profile? You know, how do we do that? And then how do we make sure we get the hospital we've been promised? Basic health and safety. How are we going to balance police versus community intervention? Or we have many people who don't want any police. They don't want any of that. And yet you know you have to have structure and you have to have law enforcement. That's why we have rules. And people are going to break the rules, and you're going to have a structure in place to be able to deal with you know, crime, which is going to continue to occur, continuing drug traffic, you know, trafficking of people, which is alive and well, and that's why we have a lot of people fleeing to our country. So those basic elements are things that I think take place, again, across the aisle. If I can bring constituents who resonate of either party, you know, and I'm a great one for, if I can't get to somebody, I'm going to get to somebody who can get to somebody. So if I have constituents who are telling me that police reform has interrupted and just destroyed our community support and relationships that were in place, you bet I'm going to bring that person up and have them talk with the committee. I mean, we have a lot of bills that are very, very bad. But I really believe that not everybody sees it from the same perspective. So how we continue to educate a variety of people and bring the real life examples to the table. You know, I'm pro-life. I'm pro-gun. I mean, and is that moderate? To someone on the other side, no. I'm pretty much, we need diversified fuel. I don't want to see us do completely away with natural gas. I think we have plenty of natural gas. We have plenty of coal, but nobody wants to use fossil fuels, so we export it all. But it's gone to someplace else in the world. So how's that helping the climate balance? Wind and wind's as good as the wind, sun's as good as the sun. It all takes electricity infrastructure to move it that wasn't even well thought out in the climate bill from my perspective. So, I mean, from that perspective, but am I like to think, I guess I'm a more reasonable, let me listen to all sides and let's figure this out. So I don't know will I build consensus? Of course, I'm not going to, and some have said, well, she said, you know, she works too much with the Democrats on get things done. I mean, in a democratically dominated legislature, of course, I'm going to work with whoever I can work with for the good of our citizens.